Hi there, Michael Eskin here with another ABC Transcription Tools demo. Recently, I've been doing a lot of work with the tool to give you complete control over the CSS classes that abcjs can put on the various elements of the notation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, this is what's used on web pages to set the colors and the backgrounds and all of the visual styling of the elements. So I want to show you an example. And again, this is probably for those of you who are a little bit more technical and willing to kind of dive into the guts of what's really happening in this notation. So I've got the cache loaded up here. And one feature, and I'm using Chrome for this, one feature in most web browsers is the ability to what's called inspect an element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go to this node here, this G node. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to click on inspect. And you can see now on the bottom here, it brings up this window inside the Chrome Developer Tools that shows you all of the information about that particular element on the web page. So on the left is the actual HTML markup for the page, and on the right are all the styles that are associated with that element. But I want you to look right here in this item here. This is an SVG group description. And you can see it says class, but there's nothing after it here. So there are no classes associated with that particular element. And a class is used to be able to define, let's say, a set of colors or that sort of thing for an element. So now I'm going to add a couple commands to the ABC here. And these are the things I recently added. This is begin CSS and end CSS. And you can see now, if we look at that same item, I'm going to right click on it again, inspect. You can see now in this class description, there's a whole bunch of classes, abcjs node, and this is telling it that it's an 8th node. This is that it's on line 1, measure 0, node number 0, and that sort of thing. So abcjs will now add all of these classes to each of the elements on the page. And because it does that, we can actually now, using CSS descriptors, change the way those elements look. So for example, if we want to change all of the abcjs notes to red, I can add some CSS. Now I'm not going to teach you how to use CSS in this video. There's plenty of tutorials online for that. But the idea is that any of the classes that are associated with an element, you can now change their appearance. So for example, let's right click on that again, inspect, and you can see here, here's the classes. For example, I know that abcjs L1 is for all things on line 1, so we'll make that abcjs L1. And you can see now that everything on line 1 is red. All of these classes are described in the user guide. If you go to the user guide and scroll down to abcjs rendering options here, and you'll see there's adding custom abcjs CSS styling. And this section will show you all of the classes that are available in abcjs, plus some additional ones I've added that are available to you to make these kinds of styling changes. One that's particularly interesting is this group called mark. And mark just lets you set any particular node in the notation to a particular style. So I'll go ahead and I'll just delete this. And I'm going to add a style here, just mark, and I'm going to set the color to, let's say, green. And now in the actual ABC, I can use a decoration. And again, this is listed in that same list of available classes right here. I'm going to put in a decoration that's just mark, and you can see that that node has now turned green. And I'm going to create another one here because I've added 10 new decorations. So we're going to say mark, let's say mark 1. There's mark 1 through mark 10 available, and I'll say fill red. And I'll change one of the nodes here. I'll make the first node of the second measure here mark 1. And you can see, oops, if I type correctly, you can see now it's turned red. So there is all kinds of flexibility of the sorts of things one can do with this. I'll just open up some examples here. These are the same examples that I've posted on Facebook. So for example, here's an example where I'm using this kind of CSS on the container. That's the background image here of the notation to put in an image here of a moose head for the Moosehead Monday session. I can do other things with it, like here's one where I've actually used it to change the background color of the editor itself. This is all described in the user manual. Here's a case where I've set all the line 1s to red, the lines 2 to green, the lines 3 to blue, and the lines number 4 to purple. And you can do some pretty crazy stuff with this. For example, you can even do animation. So here's a case where it's using a blur animation on the tune in a cycle and blurring the notes. Now that's kind of ridiculous, but I just wanted to show you. You can do some pretty exotic stuff. Let me open up another example here. Here's an example where I've put shamrocks behind the notation. This is very similar to the one with the moose head. And finally, here's one where I've set up colors for each of those mark annotations. So here's Mark, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, Mark 5, etc. And I've set up those styles up here, so each of those occur with a different color. So for example, if you were making a tutorial where you wanted to demonstrate harmonies and you wanted to have all of the, let's say, the roots of all the chords be red, have the thirds all be green, and have all of the fifths be blue, it would be very easy to set something like that up using custom styles and then marking each of the notes in the notation with the appropriate decoration that will apply that style to the note. So this is a very, very powerful feature. It gives you a lot of control over the appearance of your ABC. Any styling that you put actually in the notation will show up on things like exported PDFs, exported images, websites, and that sort of thing. So this is a very flexible and very powerful system. And I truly think that we've only begun to explore what's possible using this custom styling feature.